Listen closely, wanderer of the mind. There comes a moment in every life when the soul grows tired not from work, not from struggle, but from pleasing, from bending, from shaping itself into forms that others can accept, from smiling when it does not feel like smiling, agreeing when the heart resists, and calling it peace while something inside quietly breaks. This is not peace. This is the slow disappearance of the self. And yet most people call it being good, being kind, or being civilized. But there is a deeper truth hidden beneath these words. Whenever you constantly adjust your truth to comfort others, you abandon the seat of your inner authority. Inner authority is not loud. It does not argue. It does not chase approval. It does not beg to be understood. It simply stands like a mountain that does not ask permission from the wind. But the mind untrained forgets this mountain within itself. It becomes a mirror reflecting every passing expectation. One person desires you to be soft and you soften. Another demands you to be strong and you harden. Another wants you to be silent and you swallow your voice. And in this endless adaptation you begin to wonder, who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when I am not being shaped by others? This is the beginning of awakening. Not in the temples, not in the scriptures, but in the quiet exhaustion of pretending. To stop pleasing others is not to become cold. It is not to reject compassion. It is to purify compassion from fear. Because much of what is called kindness is actually fear in disguise, the fear of rejection, the fear of conflict, the fear of being alone. True compassion does not come from fear. It comes from clarity. And clarity says, I can care for you without losing myself. I can hear you without disappearing. I can love you without betraying my truth. When you begin to rest in this clarity, something unexpected happens. The need to be liked starts to weaken. The constant inner negotiation begins to dissolve. You no longer ask, will they approve of me? Instead, a deeper question arises, is this aligned with what is true within me? This shift changes everything. At first, the world may resist your change. Those who benefited from your silence may call you difficult. Those who enjoyed your constant agreement may call you selfish. This is natural. A lantern that finally begins to shine will disturb those who preferred the darkness of your compliance. Do not be disturbed by this disturbance. A river does not apologize for no longer being still water. Stillness and flow are both natural, but confusion arises when one is forced into the role of the other. To live from inner authority is to return to your original position before conditioning, before fear, before the countless layers of approval seeking were placed upon you. It is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering what was never lost, only ignored. When you stop pleasing others, you may feel a strange emptiness at first. This is because approval has been acting like a false center of gravity. Without it, the mind feels unanchored. But this is not emptiness in the negative sense. It is space. Something more stable begins to arise, presence. Pleasing others leads to self-loss. Constantly adjusting yourself to meet others' expectations slowly weakens your true identity and inner stability. There is a quiet suffering that most people do not notice because it does not scream. It hides behind smiles, polite agreements, and carefully chosen words. It begins when a person starts to measure their worth through the eyes of others. Slowly, without awareness, life becomes an endless attempt to be accepted, approved, and appreciated. Every action is filtered through a hidden question. Will they like me if I say this? Will they stay if I show my truth? In this process, the self becomes divided. One part is the real feeling that lives inside the heart, and the other is the version that is shaped for the world. The more a person pleases others, the more the second version grows stronger, while the first becomes quieter. At first, this seems harmless. In fact, it often feels like harmony. People may praise you for being kind, easygoing, or agreeable. But beneath that praise, something slowly weakens the sense of inner stability that does not depend on external approval. To please others constantly is to place your center outside yourself, and anything that depends on the outside is unstable by nature. Today one person approves, tomorrow another disagrees, and the mind keeps adjusting like a flag in changing winds. In this movement, identity becomes unclear. You begin to forget what you truly feel because you have practiced so long to feel what others want you to feel. This is how self-loss happens, not in a single moment, but in countless small surrenders, a word unsaid, a truth softened, a boundary ignored, a preference hidden. Each act seems small, even noble, but together they form a silent erosion of inner clarity. Over time, exhaustion appears. Not the kind caused by physical labor, but a deeper fatigue of pretending. The heart begins to whisper that something is missing, even when life appears smooth on the surface. This discomfort is not a problem, it is a signal. It is the inner nature reminding you that alignment has been lost. When a person begins to notice this pattern, awareness starts to return. It becomes clear that approval is not stability, it is dependency. And dependency always brings fear, the fear of losing what is never truly in your control. Real inner strength begins when this cycle is seen clearly, not judged, not fought, but simply understood. True inner authority is calm and independent. Real inner strength does not seek approval or argue, it remains steady like a mountain, unaffected by external opinions. Inner authority begins where approval ends. Most people imagine strength as loud expression or dominance, but true inner authority is far more subtle. It does not push others, nor does it seek permission. It simply rests within a person who no longer abandons themselves for acceptance. When the need to please becomes less important than the need to be truthful, something quiet but profound starts to unfold inside. A person caught in people-pleasing lives in constant adjustment. The mind scans every situation trying to predict reactions, prevent discomfort, and maintain approval. This creates an invisible burden. Even simple conversations become calculations. Words are selected not from honesty but from safety. Over time, this habit weakens inner clarity because the mind is no longer trained to express truth but to manage perception. Inner authority is the breaking of this pattern. It does not mean becoming harsh or indifferent. It means becoming rooted. When you are rooted, you can listen without losing yourself. You can disagree without guilt. You can remain silent without fear. Your inner space becomes less reactive and more aware. This awareness allows you to see that not every expectation deserves your compliance and not every opinion deserves your surrender. At first, this shift can feel uncomfortable. The mind used to approval may interpret independence as danger. It may create thoughts of rejection or isolation. But these thoughts are simply old conditioning losing its influence. If observed without reaction, they slowly lose strength. What remains is a deeper stability that does not depend on external agreement. As inner authority grows, relationships begin to change. Some people may distance themselves because they were connected to your compliance, not your truth. Others may respect you more deeply because they finally meet your real presence. In both cases, clarity replaces confusion. You are no longer shaped by hidden expectations, but guided by inner alignment. This does not mean life becomes conflict-free. It means conflict is no longer avoided at the cost of self-betrayal. You begin to understand that temporary discomfort is better than long-term self-loss. Saying no becomes an act of honesty, not rejection. Saying yes becomes meaningful, not automatic. With time, a quiet confidence emerges. It is not built on achievement or recognition, but on self-trust. You stop asking, "Am I acceptable?" and start living from the question, "Is this true for me?" This shift changes the entire direction of life. Decisions become clearer, energy becomes lighter, and the mind becomes less entangled in others' expectations. Many kind actions are actually driven by fear. A large part of people-pleasing comes from fear of rejection, conflict, or loneliness, not genuine compassion. When a person begins to stop pleasing others, they often misunderstand what is happening inside them. At first, it can feel like resistance, as if something important is being lost. The habit of agreeing, adjusting, and accommodating has been practiced for so long that it begins to feel like identity itself. So when it is questioned, the mind reacts with uncertainty. But what is actually being disturbed is not peace, it is conditioning. People-pleasing is a learned survival strategy. It is built slowly through experiences where acceptance seemed to depend on compliance. A child learns that agreement brings approval, while disagreement may bring rejection or discomfort. Over time, this learning becomes automatic behavior. The individual grows into adulthood carrying this invisible program, constantly scanning for emotional safety through the approval of others. But safety that depends on external validation is never stable. It shifts with moods, opinions, and circumstances. This is why a person deeply involved in pleasing others often feels internally unsettled even when life looks socially successful. There is always a subtle fear of disappointing someone, of being misunderstood, or of losing connection. This fear becomes the silent driver of many choices. When inner authority begins to awaken, this pattern is seen more clearly. A person starts noticing how often they say yes when they mean no, or how frequently they adjust their words to avoid discomfort. This awareness is not judgmental, it is revealing. It shows that much of what was believed to be kindness is actually self-abandonment disguised as harmony. As this realization deepens, the urge to perform for acceptance begins to weaken. The mind slowly learns that disagreement does not always lead to loss, and truth does not always destroy connection. In fact, relationships that depend on constant agreement are not truly stable, they are conditional. And anything conditional cannot be the foundation of inner peace. The transition is not immediate. Old patterns resist change because they are familiar. There may be moments of guilt when setting boundaries or speaking honestly. The mind may question whether it is being selfish or difficult, but these thoughts are echoes of an earlier way of living, not reflections of truth. With continued awareness, they lose their authority. In this process, a deeper understanding emerges. Being true to oneself is not a rejection of others, but a return to balance. When you no longer distort yourself to be accepted, your presence becomes more real. You no longer enter relationships as a performer, but as an authentic human being. This authenticity may not please everyone, but it brings something far more valuable in a consistency. Over time, life becomes less about managing perceptions and more about living with clarity. Stopping people-pleasing creates discomfort before clarity. When you stop seeking approval, you open yourself up to the possibility of being rejected or criticized. This can lead to a sense of discomfort and a lack of confidence. You may feel unstable at first, but this space allows true self-awareness and presence to grow. There is a subtle turning point in a human life when the need to please others begins to lose its power. It does not disappear suddenly. It weakens slowly like a habit that no longer feels natural. At first, a person may still act in familiar ways, smiling when they disagree, agreeing to avoid tension, or staying silent to maintain comfort in relationships. But inside, something has already started to shift. A quiet awareness begins to observe these actions, noticing how often they come not from truth but from fear of disapproval. This awareness is the beginning of inner authority. It is not a force that pushes outward, but a clarity that turns inward. It allows a person to see that much of their behavior has been shaped by external expectations. They begin to recognize how often they have adjusted their personality depending on who is in front of them. With family, one version appears. With friends, another. With authority figures, yet another. Slowly, identity becomes fragmented, not because the self is weak, but because it has been over-adapted. When this is seen clearly, something important happens. The desire to maintain every relationship at the cost of truth begins to feel heavy. The mind starts to question why approval from others has been given so much importance, even when it leads to internal discomfort. This questioning is not rebellion, it is awakening. It is the first sign that inner alignment is becoming more important than external validation. As this process deepens, a person may begin to experiment with honesty. They may say no where they once said yes, or express an opinion without softening it unnecessarily. These small acts can feel unfamiliar, even risky. The mind may create fear-based thoughts suggesting that rejection or conflict will follow. But with experience, something surprising is discovered. Truth does not always destroy connection. In fact, it often clarifies it. Some relationships may weaken during this phase, especially those built entirely on compliance. Others may become more genuine because they are no longer maintained through constant self-adjustment. This filtering is not loss in the emotional sense, it is purification. What remains is what can exist without illusion. Over time, a deeper stability begins to form within. It is not dependent on praise or acceptance. It is based on self-recognition. A person starts to feel anchored in their own presence, less disturbed by changing opinions and external reactions. This does not mean they become indifferent. It means they become centered. Inner authority is this centeredness. It is the ability to remain aligned with truth even when external pressure encourages distortion. It is the quiet strength of no longer abandoning oneself for the sake of approval. And in this state, life becomes simpler, clearer, and more honest, not because the world changes, but because the need to please it no longer controls the direction of the mind. Inner freedom brings balanced relationships and peace. When you act from truth instead of approval seeking, you create a more balanced and peaceful life. Relationships become more real, and you gain dignity, clarity, and inner peace. When inner authority is fully understood, it no longer feels like an idea or a philosophy. It becomes a lived state of being. It is not something a person tries to maintain, it is something that naturally arises when the habit of self-abandonment ends. At this stage, the need to please others is no longer a central force in decision-making. It may still appear occasionally, but it no longer controls the direction of life. For most people, approval has long been treated as emotional security. Being liked feels safe, and being rejected feels like danger. Because of this, the mind develops countless strategies to avoid discomfort. It learns to adjust tone, suppress disagreement, and shape personality according to expectations. Over time, this creates a life that looks socially smooth but internally divided. A person may function well in the world while feeling disconnected from their own center. Inner authority begins to dissolve this division. It brings attention back to a simple but often ignored truth: your experience is happening inside you, not inside the minds of others. No matter how much approval you receive, it cannot replace self-awareness. And no matter how much rejection you face, it cannot erase your inner existence. This recognition slowly shifts the foundation of identity from external validation to internal clarity. As this shift stabilizes, a person begins to notice how often they have acted against their own understanding just to maintain harmony. They see the cost of avoiding honesty, unspoken resentment, emotional fatigue, and a subtle loss of self-respect. This awareness is not meant to create guilt. It is meant to restore clarity. When you see clearly how self-abandonment operates, you naturally begin to reduce it. Living from inner authority does not mean ignoring others or rejecting relationships. It means entering relationships without losing yourself in them. You can listen without absorbing every expectation. You can empathize without becoming responsible for every emotion around you. You can disagree without hostility and agree without losing authenticity. This balance creates a new kind of interaction, one based on presence rather than performance. There is a quiet strength that develops when a person stops constantly adjusting themselves. It is not loud or aggressive. It is steady. It does not need to defend itself because it is not built on illusion. Even when misunderstood, it does not collapse inwardly. Even when challenged, it does not abandon its center. This stability is what many people unknowingly seek through external validation, but it cannot be found there. It can only emerge when the search for approval loses its dominance. With time, life becomes less about managing how others see you and more about understanding how you exist within yourself. Decisions become less reactive and more intentional. Emotions become less entangled in external approval. Silence becomes comfortable and honesty becomes natural.